Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a brief look at a different independent role-playing game. This week, well, I'm not covering a role-playing game, at least not one that fits into my own admittedly rather loose definition of role-playing games. Yes, this is one of those games that Steam categorized as an RPG, but is most decidedly not an RPG, and I really didn't realize it until I'd already pretty much completed the game. It is a very brief game. However, I'm still covering it, because it's close enough, and because I believe that it might be a prelude to further things down the line that are RPGs, and also because I was rather impressed with some aspects of it. So let's get into it. Duncan and the Wisp was developed and published by a string of student developers known as Team Locust, and was released on Steam on June 10th, 2019. Duncan and the Wisp is available for free as of this recording. It is a top-down action clicker that outwardly resembles a dungeon-crawling RPG, except that it has no real ability scores, character advancement, skills, or even a branching storyline. It's also completable in about an hour and some change. That having been said, it actually has a solid little storyline for what it is, and some strategy involved in the combat, which I'll get into towards the end. In terms of a plot, you play as Duncan, a member of a village of animals that has been summoned by the village elder for a particular task. Along the way, you uncover a Wisp who proceeds to advise and help you out on the quest that suddenly opens up before you, involving the return of a great evil, saving the world, and the unlocking of various elemental gems. Gameplay elements are introduced over time during the first couple of levels, but basically involve moving around a map and hacking and slashing through enemies. The main character has hit points, mana, and a summon refresh timer, all represented by bars at the top of the screen. There is a magical ranged attack that takes mana to use, general dash and heal abilities that also take mana to use, and an elemental summon ability that can be used when the character is low on health and takes a while to refresh thereafter. In combat, you can click on an enemy to swing at them and to damage them. There's an area effect wave attack that automatically engages if you attack a group of enemies clumped together. As you progress through the game, you also unlock different elemental crystals, each of which modifies the character's magical range attack. For instance, the fire crystal turns the ranged attack into a burning flame, and the ice crystal makes your ranged attack freeze things that it hits, and so on and so forth. The eventual goal of the game is to get all of the crystals, so the extra abilities accrue as you collect them. There are only a few types of creatures to deal with in the game. There's the general melee creatures that are skeletons, which are best dealt with melee attacks. There's also elementals of each of the main types: earth, fire, ice, wind, and shadow. Each of these has its own abilities and is best dealt with through use of the magical ranged attack. Some strategy comes in this point because the different elementals each have their own strengths and weaknesses against other elemental types. Each level before the last tends to focus on just one elemental type, but waves of enemies between levels, and of course the last level overall, actually introduce multiple elementals in the same pack, at which point you'll have to go ahead and learn to switch between which elemental attacks you're using based on what you're facing. And that's basically it. The game uses a checkpoint system, so you're not very far away from rejoining the game at any particular moment if you do perish, and you can always quit and come back from the latest checkpoint if you decide you need a break. Graphically, the game uses a 3D top-down view with a fixed camera angle. The models and background are colorful and consistent and pleasant to look at. The interface is clean and relatively polished when it pops up because there's minimal interactions with it. And the music is quite fitting and pretty good all in all. For a student project, which this is, I'm rather impressed with that overall. There are some minor bugs and places where things could have been polished up better. Moving and clicking with the mouse was occasionally awkward, clipping of the background can use some polish, and the enemy animations were a bit hit or miss. Sometimes they wouldn't go off at all, but all in all, for a free student game, it holds together better than some full purchase price games that I've seen out there. There is one bug I encountered, and I encountered it near the end, which almost made it look like I couldn't continue. Any time that I restarted a particular checkpoint, I ended up getting bumped into a nearby wall and killed. But I was able to exit the game and come back and continue without too much effort from that checkpoint. The writing is okay, but the story is actually pretty good from that regard. It seems like the typical elemental-based questing that you see in so many RPGs, but there is a surprise twist at the end. And even knowing that going in, it got me expecting one thing, but then the twist was actually something else entirely, so I was pleasantly surprised there. The ending also seems to leave open the idea of a continuation for future games. I can't help but feel that there was supposed to be more put into the game, actually, since the town at the start is pretty large, with a number of NPCs to interact with that actually have no bearing on events. So aside from being tricked by Steam's categories, since this is not yet an RPG, although it's got the core of one, I still enjoyed it, and I can see where Duncan and the Wisp could be turned into a full RPG at some point. I definitely think that this dev team should continue making games, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with next if they decide that this one is not worth continuing, although it would be interesting to see the rest of the story. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here at that. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Duncan and the Wisp. As always, I'll put a link to the Steam page in the description below. Next week, I'm definitely going to go back to proper RPGs again. I've already got a couple lined up. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to support more reviews and contents on this channel, you can support me on Patreon or Subscribestar, the latter of which is gaining more importance in my regard, and the links in the description below. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.